So I am Kim Matenchuck, and I'm from GE Digital. And if you're standing there thinking, what on earth can she possibly be talking about? Don't they make things like this? Light bulbs, the white goods that are in your house, airplane engines, wind turbines. Don't they monitor large-scale technology? Yeah, we definitely do those things. However, I'm from the digital arm, and we work with a lot of new emerging industries. So part of the things we do would be working with our manufacturing software. So we would target customers like automotive, food and beverage and consumer packaged goods, pharma, steel and pressed steel, chemicals, life sciences, all of the non-traditional industries that GE has previously gone after. And when we look at how digital has evolved as one of the business units within GE, when we first started, we were actually set up just like one of the other business units. This is fine in some respects because you need those processes, but it didn't work in others because it meant that our sales staff wasn't quite aligned the way that a sales organization needs to move. And so when I'm standing here today talking, it's about how to extend the sales culture beyond just your sales floor and how to engage your whole business in selling. So our customers and prospects operate in a very complex, volatile environment. Therefore, we have sellers that have to outcome sell across a lot of different industries, all of which have different external pressures. So, for example, some might be slowing growth productivity, new business models like the emergence of Tesla and Uber and what happens when you completely disrupt the market, changes in the network economy, and also a shift to data-driven growth, which is really fast-tracking what happens with adoption and change. And when we think about our sales organization and evolving it, we first have to actually stop and consider what's actually required. Everybody is running forward and saying, we need to do this, we need to change here, we need to do this. But if you actually stop first and think, what would be the smart thing? What have we got that we can work with? And where do we need to go from there? You'll actually go a lot farther faster. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how GE Digital has approached this. We need a lot of different skills. And when you think about sales, and for anyone in this room, I'm sure almost everybody knows this, unless there's some way that you're not actually involved in the sales organization, but sales isn't a single skill set. We need a lot of different skills across a sales organization and within our organization. So we don't apply a hunter versus farmer methodology, just to be clear. We also don't apply a lot of the other typical sales methodologies. We have tried them. We've tried almost all of them through different ways, shapes, and forms. But what we find is that they fall short in a couple of ways. They box people into different categories and says that their behavior must always be one way or another, when we know for a fact that individuals, and your team is made up of individuals, they have different skill sets. They all have strengths in some areas, they all have weaknesses in some areas, and they have those hidden skills that you might not have seen yet, and we want to extract those and bring those to the forefront of where the team is. So you can have a farmer that's good at some parts of new business. You can have a hunter who may actually be great at developing long-term relationships, but not so good right in the beginning. You can have a new business development manager who's great at developing the long-term relationships. The problem is he constantly has to hand them off. And when we look at, when we look at sales skills holistically, we're not actually just looking at can he or she sell, because I think everybody is aware that selling is involved with lots of different components. So what we actually want is a balance of skills across the team and across the rest of our organization. And that includes the sales team, anyone who's client-facing, and anyone who's contributing to commercial success. So a quick highlight of some of these skills and some of the ones that I'm sure you're seeing in your organizations. Some people are great at opening. They can talk to anyone and everyone opens up to them. They can draw out really interesting tidbits. They can keep people talking for hours. They're great at inside sales or new business development. Others are excellent at strategic planning. They can navigate a prospect's organization well, they can map it out, and they can bring everybody along with them. Some can relate to everybody on the shop floor and or CEOs, but if you put them in front of a legal team, it's terrible. Others are amazing at closing. They excel at those last few stages where they really need to convince somebody that, in fact, this is the challenge, you have the right product to fix it, and there's no time like the present to buy it. Some are good generalists throughout, but they really love the legal negotiation stage. Unfortunately, you need those people too. Some really dislike hard sales, but they're brilliant at account management. And if you think that account management isn't actually part of sales, I would seriously challenge that, because it's far cheaper and more efficient to actually upsell an existing customer, as I'm sure you all know, than to try to find a new one. So when you think of transforming your organization, we found, first and foremost, that knowing your team and being willing to draw out those best skills and abilities from them, even if it doesn't quite fit the mold, is critical. Then, be ready to look at how you leverage the rest of the organization to be more effective. So, if you want to expand your sales culture beyond the shop floor, then you actually do need to consider that old adage that everyone is a salesperson, just maybe not quite in the way that you think. So we've tried a lot of things over the last few years, and one of the things that made the most impact was the fact that we created multifunctional deal teams. So all of our long-term, strategic, or high-revenue generating accounts have deal teams, all of them. And actually, some of our critical net new prospects also get assigned deal teams, even though they're in a really early stage. Firstly, it assigns everyone's priorities, and then it brings a broader skill set to the mix, so you help bring in skills that you don't have. And it helps distill a focus of commercial priority across all of the different departments, so you get everybody going in the same direction. And I really do mean all of the departments. And this can be awkward for a lot of people. So our deal teams do consist of technical people, just like everybody else's do, where they are pre-sales solution architects, technical consultants, technical account managers, customer success managers, account managers, implementation people, project managers, all of the typical functions. Those guys are definitely, guys or girls, are definitely in the deal teams. The next level, though, is that we also align finance, legal, and the deal desk. And for us, the deal desk is the team that helps to write different proposals, and they're also the compliance gate. Now here's the last set of it. We also pull in product management, marketing, and communications. Not necessarily on every element of every deal team, but when we need them, they're always assigned. We set very specific commercial goals by team relating to an account. And so you can do this the way we do it. You can also do it with OKRs. You can do it with incentives, incentive plans, targets, however you decide to do it. We've definitely found that giving everybody a goal and going in one direction and that goal being written down is a crucial part of making the team work. The third thing is, don't underestimate the power of recognition. So a few years ago, we were working on what we would call a lighthouse prospect. So this means something that was highly strategic, and if won, it would help us pave the way for future business. We literally won it, yay, with the deal team approach. When the internal announcement happened and the congratulatory email was sent out, 46 people were recognized across 8 departments. 46 people, and only 8 of those were sales or pre-sales. It was a multi-regional deal. There were a number of regions that were involved, but only 8 were actually in a sales function or in a pre-sales function. So if you're wondering, how on earth did you do that, and why did you even need to do that? 46 people, can't you guys sell something a little bit faster and more efficiently than that? The challenge was, at the time, actually we couldn't. We were bringing a new product to the market. We were combining a couple of sets of technologies, making it smoother and streamlined, and this was the first time that all of those products were coming together. And we were targeting a customer segment and a vertical that we hadn't worked with before. And so in fact, we needed all of those different people and all of those different skill sets. And we got all of them on board so that they could bring their departments on board. So I'll give you one anecdote of what this looked like. We took 8 of the customer to one of our offices in first Atlanta to go look at something very specific that they wanted to see, and then we took them to California, where the majority of our project management team sat. They wanted to spend 3 or 4 days really digging under the hood with the product management team, talking about what would happen with the roadmap, if they were the first customer to embrace this, what would that look like in terms of partnership, what would be happening along the way. We put a project management team on that to project manage everybody that would be touching them as they went along the line. There were demos that were created specifically for them. Again, because it's the first time that we're doing this, not everything was built out yet. The communications team was involved. They helped us write the scripts in terms of the storyline that we wanted to tell. The marketing team was involved to actually make sure that everything we were showing had a consistent look and feel, and we were absolutely demonstrating what needed to happen as we went along the line. The implementation team came later, and everyone was briefed and project managed for 3.5 weeks with prep every afternoon in terms of how we were going to make sure that this went as smooth as possible. And when you think it's easy to get 40 or 35 people every afternoon in terms of time zones, languages, focus, different priorities, it's not, but actually we found that because we had the DL team approach, a lot of people were automatically shifting different priorities in their calendar to make sure that they could make time to make it as successful as possible. Now, when you fast forward a few years and that product is in place and that vertical is already working, we still send recognition emails internally. They do tend to be shorter now with fewer people. We are getting more efficient at this. But actually, everybody continues to do it because they always say, that was the thing that happened for client X, and I thought that because I was in this function, I wouldn't get recognized for that, and I can't tell you how much I appreciated that. And so sometimes it's those little things that make you think, okay, we have to make sure that we do that. And when we look at how that team is engaging now, literally a few years after the fact, that entire team, all of those 46 people, are still highly engaged. They're following what's happening on the implementation side now and what the rollout stories are. And they're always asking if there's something else that they need to do, if they can step in, if there's anything that they can help on. Skill set gaps and upgrades. Leveraging your organization to transfer both skills and knowledge is hugely beneficial. And we tackle this in a couple of different ways. One of the ways that we do it, though, is by embracing shadowing and by looking at short-term secondments. So these can be incredibly effective in terms of bringing knowledge up, but it also provides additional experts within your organization. So for example, I've talked to a few people over the course of the day already about the fact that we are currently growing our inside sales team. And one of the things that we did this summer was that we had a huge burst of shadowing with some of our new inside sales team. So we had experienced sellers, professional services, solution architects come in, sit with them. Some of them were providing hands-on, more theater-style training. Some of them were literally listening in on the calls, prompting them silently behind the lines, and then literally speaking with them after in terms of what went well. Don't forget to mention this. If they say this keyword, it's, you need to go here next. Make sure that you ask about this. It was hugely beneficial. And actually, when we did the surveys about what worked the best, if we had straight training, if we had white papers, if we had whatever, they all liked the shadowing the best because they felt it was the thing that they got the most of. And then they also felt that when they came against something that they didn't understand later or went very technical, they knew right away who the experts were. They could drop them a quick email or ping them and say, hey, something kind of odd has happened. Can I ping this over to you? Do you mind taking a look and just telling me what you think I should do here? This is beyond my technical scope. And so those relationships develop quite fluently. Likewise, we currently have 2 short-term secondments happening just in our team. One is for the sales team. We've seconded somebody who's in the professional services capacity purely for a language skill that we don't have. And this is a person who's worked in a range of industries already and is eyeing up sales as the next possible career move. And in another possibility, we also have somebody who's doing sales operations. So we have an older product that is not necessarily as leading edge as it once was, and we actually want that person to do the win-loss analysis. The thing is, because it's a highly specified product, we need somebody with a far more in-depth technical knowledge than perhaps what our typical sales operations people would have. So we're putting both of those people in sales roles or asking them to act as in a sales capacity. They don't necessarily have the typical sales skills, and in this position, they're not necessarily closing, but they're still fulfilling quite a specific gap for us. Lastly, leveraging your organization helps to keep your customers at the heart of everything that you do. So it's critical to make sure that no matter how you're restructuring your organization or pulling different people in, adding people to the team, you do it in a way that's the most beneficial for your customer. If you have a customer-driven organization, they're always at the heart of everything you do, and it makes decision-making very easy. One of the things that we find with deal teams is that it literally makes it far easier to ensure that we have devil's advocate. We look at all sides before we're going down one path or another. I see role playing happening in the teams where it might be the salesperson saying, okay, I have to have this conversation. Can I bounce some ideas off of somebody before we go in? Let's talk about how that person will react. And at the same time, we have people in technical roles who are coming back to the deal team and saying, I'm worried that when I go in to the shop floor on Thursday, here's what's going to happen because of X, Y, Z and what I can see in the logs happening or what they've been raising. Let's talk about how we can help them work through so that when I go there, I have something that I can talk to them right away and they can see that we're taking action quickly. The other thing is, it's far easier to move through really traditional roadblocks, like, do you need a slight discount and it's slightly below what you need? Do you need more professional services just for a short-term thing because there's an unexpected bump? It's much easier to get those and really get to the heart of what the customer needs if all the right people are already in the room and they're really used to working with each other. They know the history on the account and they're willing to step in because they feel accountability towards it. So, how do you do this? Well, I think the honest truth is that it actually takes some time and quite a lot of planning. The other thing is high-profile, regular executive support is critical, and you need consistent, high-quality, and completely available enablement. There's no dodging that part. So we do some live enablement, and by that I mean somebody standing up on stage, theater-style sitting, and our sales team and all of the customer teams that are there, we do it this way sometimes. The thing is, it's good for some parts of enablement, but it doesn't actually match the way that everybody learns. And so the nice thing about doing something like this and personalized learning journeys is that when a person is ready to learn more, has some more time, wants to look into something, or needs to spot train, all of the material is already available. Learning guides do exist by function, so we do have them for sales, for inside sales, for solution architects, etc. So you can expand in your role. But if you want to expand outside of your role and take on new skills, we actually don't restrict them by function. And so if you're not in a sales capacity, but you're about to be taking on some work where you are customer focused now, or, for example, you're in our finance team and you're about to be put on a deal team, there is material available and people to help work you through these different skill sets. So when you think about it, your sales team is actually, your actual sales team is really just a small percentage of people who touch your client. So cross-functional training helps bridge this gap because you'll definitely have a rollout team. You'll have the administrative team. What about your billing team? What about everybody who solves any kind of billing problems? How often have you heard somebody saying, wow, those guys were awful. Can you believe they said this to my customer? For all intents and purposes, that is what they think of your company if they hear that from a person. We also allow peer recognition. So we have quarterly awards that are available where somebody in the deal team can recognize somebody else in the deal team. And we also nominate different deal teams as a group for everybody that's in the deal team on certain things that are done extremely well. And this is going to be a little bit shocking, we sometimes recognize them even when they lose a critical prospect. The reason for that is because if we're going through as a group and doing all of the behavior correctly, even if we fail once, we're probably going to get it right the next time around. Everybody will be working much more quickly and closely together. We're more efficient. And not all of the decisions come down to things that we can control. Sometimes it's cost, sometimes it's legal, sometimes it's different hurdles that we can't get past, or it's different things changing and other priorities on the client side. So we don't necessarily make the criteria just win or lose. We will actually also reward people for the right behavior all the way through, even if the outcome isn't sometimes what we'd like. So, just to recap, what's really worked well for us, and what are some of the things that really haven't worked well? I think on the rough water side, you really can't underestimate the time that it takes to change behavior. You can get everybody on board, or almost everybody, and still have a few outliers around the edges. This doesn't mean that it's not actually working. It means that it is. It's just that people are actually people. We've gone about this a couple of different ways where you put technology first or people first, and we actually do find that you need the hearts and minds first to get people on board before they'll embrace the technology. And as it stands, yesterday or the day before, I did get a call from somebody else in one of the deal teams saying, this salesperson is just beyond difficult. They're still not going down this path with us. Compared to every other deal team that I'm on or anything else that we're working on, they are still consistently the most difficult to work with. How do we help them get over this particular line? And the first thing I said was, well, thanks very much for the feedback. I'm really sorry that this is still happening, but I liked the fact that he approached it as, how do we help them change the behavior? So he wasn't actually calling to complain. Well, a little bit of complaining. But after that, the thing that he wanted was to help the person get over that mark so that they could become more effective together. So it does take time. Teaming can be bumpy in the early days. We've absolutely had personality clashes between people and different ways of working, especially when you take different groups of people in different functions who have always had conflicting priorities and you try to merge them into a path where you're going after one goal. There's going to be a few strong conversations. So hold your nerve, make sure that you're coaching your team through it, and try to keep the mudslinging between people to a limit if you can. The other thing is, in the beginning, they don't know each other well enough necessarily. So the sales team will know the solution architects, but they might not know the finance team well enough. So they automatically presume that because you're saying no or objecting, you're just being difficult, when really what might be happening is the finance team is asking about something because they don't understand why we're approaching it that way. So sometimes the teaming element is a little bit more difficult than you think. The test and learn approach is great, but sometimes you get some very interesting surprises. I think that everybody assumes that test and iterate always means positive growth. We've certainly had instances where testing sometimes fails, and you have to be prepared for that. There's one particular, I think I put it on here, Hunters Club. There's one particular thing where the only thing I can actually say about this, and I think I'm being polite here, is it failed spectacularly. It absolutely flopped. So here's what we tried to do, and it combusted on itself. We wanted to fast track new business development before we had an inside sales team in-house. And one of the ideas that had come up in the group was for a Hunters Club. So we talked about this on and off for quite a while and decided to give it a try. So despite people volunteering, being very keen, managers putting them forward, people putting themselves forward, everyone going through training to make sure that we were doing things, we standardized processes, we got them the technology to make sure that they all had logins and could access the right tools and their phones were hooked up. We did all of that. Best intentions in the world, and what ended up happening was that there was a very marked difference between aspirations and skill set. And that was very clear in the amount of new business that, quite frankly, didn't move forward. Where we ended up with this is, in fact, it takes a really specific skill set to be a new business development manager, to be an inside salesperson. And you have to be constantly willing to put yourself out there. So the best account manager in the world who thinks that they can talk to everybody didn't want to pick up the phone and cold call. And so what we ended up doing was just saying, thanks guys, really appreciate the effort. We learned a lot in this 10-week test. In fact, we did recognize everybody who took part in that because they really put themselves out there. It just didn't work. And so sometimes when you try stuff, just be prepared for the fact that if it doesn't work, figure out why and try again, but try something else. Now the next one, when borrowing skills, specify very clearly what's required. This was something else that we learned along the way. So we do second people. They're also called bubble assignments. So you can either do it completely as 100% for a short period of time, or we have some instances where somebody does 50% of their normal job and 50% of the other job part-time. We actually announced that we were looking for a couple of secondments to fill really specific gaps. And we had some very interesting views on this, because some people came to us and said, I absolutely want to do this, and I don't understand why you don't think I can't do X job. You know, this is a career path. I want to be put into this. Why won't you train me? And we had to think about the way that we were actually positioning the message, because it wasn't about providing career opportunity and career growth in the first instance. It was about filling a very specific skill set, and we needed certain things done by a certain timeline. And so sometimes when you think you're communicating the right message, you get a very surprising result. The last thing is, sometimes your best sellers or your technical solution architects aren't actually that great of teachers. It really depends, and teaching, like anything else, is a skill set that you either have or you're growing, or perhaps you don't have. We had a lot of people volunteer to be teachers for different initiatives already as we've gone through the years. Managers have put people forward because it's a growth area. This will be great for their career. It will showcase different things that they can do. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you get agendas from specific people, and they're not covering either what you need covered, or they don't meet the needs of what the trainee needs. And so sometimes you really find yourself in a situation where it's like, look, I know you want to do this. The thing is, it's just not working. So you do have to be careful about that. And lastly on that, we've also found that sometimes you pick up great trainers in areas that you absolutely wouldn't consider. So we've had a couple of great trainers from compliance and finance, not necessarily areas that you think would be great for sales training, but in fact, those people have worked in those functions for quite a long time, and so a lot of the training that they did was talking about, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what they've seen over their time at GE Digital, and where they see trending, people doing really well or really poorly, and actually that was very well received. But again, not a place that we would have looked for those trainers. What are some things that were definitely on the smoother sailing side? First, vocal, repeated executive sponsorship and accountability is critical. So you can't just have your executive team stand up and say, yes, yes, we must do this, now go into the abyss. What actually needs to happen is that they have to be regularly interested, follow up, and in our case, we actually had our CCO randomly turn up to deal team meetings to just clock in and see how people were doing. That definitely threw a few people off at first, but when they realized that she was actually joining because she was interested and she wanted to help bring people on board, they realized, one, she wasn't going to do it forever, but also, two, she was curious. And so that also helped drive some behavior. Deal teams really do help change the behavior across functions faster than anything else that we've tried. Again, 46 people on a deal team, and only 6 of them were sales or pre-sales. But in fact, that was still the lighthouse account that everybody talks about 3 years later. Be consistent in your enablement. A lot of people are on a sharp learning curve, including some of your sales team. They may be picking up different skills or rounding out different skills that you're hoping that they'll come up with. So providing consistent training, but also the opportunity for them to put it into practice is essential. The worst thing to happen is that you go through an enablement push, but then you don't give them the chance to try it and help them course correct their behavior if they don't get it quite right. Expect that some people aren't going to get it quite right off the bat. That's okay. If they're mostly going in this direction, they're going to get there. They just need some practice. It takes time to change. As I mentioned before, strategic shadowing and skills transfer, we found one-to-one is absolutely more effective than one-to-many. So again, we do some stage enablement for larger groups, but we follow it up quite a lot with more one-to-one. So as the manager or the management team, it takes a lot more planning and foresight, but actually we've consistently found that the results are better. Being open to seeing people round out different skills that you either didn't think they had or they didn't have in those capacities. And also looking at people in a different way that you didn't think before. So we've had this happen quite a few times where we think somebody is a pre-sales solution architect, box. Somebody is in a finance box. And when you have them working in a deal team or a more rounded environment where everybody is contributing to commercial success, you do actually see sides of people that they don't necessarily show in their day job, but they are more than capable of bringing those skills to the organization. And lastly, there is no I in team. I hate quotes like that, but actually there isn't. And a team, a true team, wins together and they lose together. So you need to make sure that when you either have success or failure, it's a group success or a group failure. Even if there's one person who's leading the team, quite frankly, they didn't do it by themselves. Nobody does anything by themselves in a team. They need all of those different skill sets, all of those people, even if it's at different stages as you go along the sales process. Everyone's contribution is absolutely needed, and when you're working in an environment like this, you can really expand your sales culture beyond just your sales team. So I know I've talked a lot about the human side of things, and the reason that I've done that specifically is because, again, we have the technology internally where we can look at a lot of different elements. We've tried and put people in front of technology first, but for us, we have always consistently found that hearts and minds are critical first, and then set everybody else up with the technology that they need after. That's it from me. Thank you.